Welcome to the first. You have a story. If you look back on your life, you've done things for the first time that no one in your family, in your town, in the country has done. This is Dr. Sandi. You have unknowingly paved the way for others without knowing it or even acknowledging it. This is where you tell your story so that those who come after you can walk in your footsteps to build their own firsts. Welcome to today's podcast episode of The First with me, Dr. Sandi, where we dive deep into the fascinating journey of Stephanie B. McAuliffe. Stephanie's the first in her family to break the cycle of 4 generations of alcoholism. She's an author and thought leader who challenges the conventional understanding of boundaries, highlighting how many of us were raised with rules rather than true boundaries. She explored the transformative power of life's journey, emphasizing how showing up differently can turn discomfort into a positive force. Stephanie also delves into the intriguing ways our patterns persist throughout our lives. Her latest book will be out soon, and you can find her on LinkedIn and Instagram at Stephanie B. McAuliffe. Hey, everybody, this is Dr. Sandi with the first podcast, and today my guest is Stephanie McAuliffe.
I am thrilled to be here, and I'm so looking forward to our conversation today.
Yes. Well, let's jump right into it. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Stephanie, what you do, and what your firsts are, and we'll just get rocking and rolling here.
Oh my goodness. So I was an executive on Wall Street for 27 years. Well, I worked my way up to an executive level and then left my career. It was almost like I needed to give myself permission to not do what really didn't resonate anymore.
Well,
So that
is it that you just didn't like what you were doing anymore, even though that's what you've been doing for a long time?
I was exhausted on every aspect and all level of my
And
life.
what was your career?
I started out as a COBOL programmer, and then I worked my way up through project and then program management. And my last, what I'll call gig, my last big assignment was a 4-year, $85 million global tax transformation program. I had a business partner. I had dozens and dozens of people who either reported to me or I was coordinating with. And when that was complete and we handed it over to the business and they had operationalized everything, I was looking for another role. And it's like, but I don't want to do the same thing over again. And I had been working 12 and 14-hour days. And when you're in program management, you're rarely off. And I was commuting into Lower Manhattan, and it was just like, and I was posting for roles both in the organization and outside of it. And I said, but what am I going to do now? $100 million program? I went on a retreat in Toronto, and it was that weekend that I gave myself, quote unquote, permission to leave Wall Street. Like, I don't want to do this. And the reason that I'm not finding another role is because my energy wasn't aligned with it.
Isn't that amazing, though? Your body sometimes to say enough, and your brain, and it may be a lucrative career, you're making money, and there comes a point when it's just enough.
Truly, truly. And so I took some time to like, what do I really want to do? And then I got the idea of you're going to write a book. So I stepped into that, and my first book was published in May of 2017.
What was the book?
The title is The Message in the Bottle: Finding Hope and Peace Amidst the Chaos of Living with an Alcoholic. I started going really deep into my own journey, but not only that, the generational cycles that I had inherited, that I was living in. And I started actually getting into energy work. And so with the writing of my first book, I was the first to really begin to break some of these generational cycles and to give a voice to what had been silenced in many ways, because growing up in the 60s and 70s, you didn't give a voice to these things. You
That's right.
couldn't let anybody know what was happening underneath your roof. So there was like the walls of your house were like a facade. And
Correct.
from the outside, everything looked perfect, even though there could be chaos, abuse, be it physical, psychological, emotional, happening underneath your roof. And it's what I call the trappings of the middle class upbringing. And it happens in all classes because we see it
Correct.
no matter what the financial level of our families. And when I started break these cycles and give a voice, this was not something that was championed by many of my family members.
I could imagine.
And
It's
so
not a celebration going on here, Stephanie.
it is not. And yet I've helped so many people. So I'm now, I call myself a multidimensional personal transformation coach and energy healer because we're looking at the physical, the mental, the emotional, the energetic, and the spiritual aspects of how we've been silenced. How do we step into the truth of who we are and heal the multiple aspects of these stories that we've either taken on, that we were taught, that we inherited? Because there's a lot of science behind the fact that newborns can smell fear in their mothers. You think of you're in your mother's womb for 8, 9, 10 months. You're taking on all of the energy, all of the thoughts, all of the feelings that she is experiencing through this. There's also studies that are happening that are looking at war veterans and how anxiety is passed through the sperm. So
Huh.
it's not just all about mom, it's mom and dad. And when you think of generationally what they took on, when we look at our family tree, it can be a fascinating, fascinating exploration into feeling these things. Where do they come from? And when you look at it, we can receive a lot of information through that simple exercise.
So you're saying your DNA actually carries fear and anxiety and some of all the things that we think are emotional. It carries emotions in our DNA
Yes,
that's inherited from our parent, our generations.
yes,
Or
yes. And there are multiple studies that show this. There's actually a worm study, and a lot of times nematodes are studied because they're in some ways the DNA is similar to ours, except their lifespan is a lot shorter. And so what they did is they injected, I forget what it was, into a nematode. And they saw that it actually carried forward through 14 generations.
and is that a structure, DNA structure to ours?
I can't speak depth to it, and yet there are enough that they are used as a construct us. I mean, we as humans are much more complicated and complex. And part of the complexity is our ego. Whereas most of things in nature just do what they naturally do. They're not thinking about, do I need to go to the store? They eat, they procreate. Our experience as humans is much more complex. And yet we see through nature how we as humans take on and mimic a lot of what nature does as well.
So that's all interesting and it's making me think because I always thought it's more of the behavioral things that you see that's kind of passed down, right? So for example, a lot of people said to me, you're a good business person. And I felt that I went to school, I've been around a lot of business people, so I picked that up. I learned that's a learned behavior. But there's a story that I really want to write a book about. It was my great, she in the 1800s, right, was a merchant marine, and she had a boat, and she went around from island to island buying and selling goods. and she was very entrepreneurial. That was handed down to my grandmother was the same way. She taught, this was what I heard growing up, you have to make sure you can take care of yourself. In case that man leaves you with kids, you have to take care of yourself. And so she said, you learn how to, they call it turning your hand, learn how to use your hands,
Mhm.
right, to do things because you'll never be out of work. You can cook, you can sew, you can do things that people want. And so I heard that. I was always, from the time I was little, very entrepreneurial, always doing things. And people say, oh, it was down to me, right? Or you got it from your grandmother. And now that you're saying this, it's not just necessarily a behavioral thing, but there could be an entrepreneurial DNA gene.
Absolutely. And I think what we see helps to solidify what we've taken on. So you saw it, you heard it, you heard
Right.
the stories, right? But you already had that within you. And I think similarly, if there is a history of, you're not worthy, you're you're
Mhm.
not, supposed to be here. Think
Mhm.
of a young woman who gets pregnant, and it's like, I'm not supposed to be pregnant. You're not supposed to be here. Like,
Mhm.
and she's experiencing all these things.
Right.
Then those fears and that feeling of lack of worth can actually be something that, like, we're born with, and we don't know where it comes from. And this is why I focus on the energy work as well, because we can know a story. We can know that our mother was young or unwed or had her own trauma. But yet, when we've taken on the energy that she was, of the fears that she was experiencing, when we clear those, we're no longer carrying that story of, I'm illegitimate, I'm not supposed to be here, because God doesn't create anybody who isn't supposed to be here.
So you clear the energy, but the DNA, if it's in DNA, it's still going to be there, right? You can still hand that down to someone.
Well, but through epigenetics, we can actually shift the genetics within our body. Bruce Lipton, who wrote the book, The Biology of Belief, it's like, if we believe something will work,
Hmm.
or if we something won't work, what we believe is true. And so when we shift the energy of, I'm not worthy to be here on this planet because I would not have been born otherwise. I am meant to do great things. We also shift our own DNA through epigenetics.
I've not heard that one.
It's fascinating. And so part of it is we clear the energy and we transform the story into what it is that we want to create. And this is where affirmations can actually help us,
Mm.
because it's reminding ourselves of, you know, who am I really out from underneath this story? What am I creating? What am I bringing to the world? And it may be that I am the best checkout person at Trader Joe's, and I am sharing love and smiles and hope with everything, every single comes through that line. It doesn't have to be this big grand thing,
Right.
but like, what makes you happy? What brings you joy? What is it that you want to bring to the world? And so it's moving beyond those old stories that we either took on or we heard, and
But
coming.
it's something you said earlier was, your family didn't really feel this vibe that you're doing, right? And that's part of this whole cycle. There's stuff we don't talk about, and so we never really resolve those issues. So, how does your family feel that you wrote this book and you aired the laundry, so to speak, of what's going on? How do they treat you and how do they behave with you about that?
There was tension, and I have to look at it from the perspective of, what am I really here to do? And so I've written a second book, of which the second edition will be published at the end of February. And the title is The Impact of Silence. And the subtitle, the new one is Reclaim the Soul of Your Soul. And I actually sent that to my mother before the first edition was published. And in there, I talk a lot about the science and our energy and give invitations for people to discover their family tree, to move beyond some of the stories that they've taken on. And that actually helped her. And it helped to clear some of the tension between us
Mm-hmm.
because she saw I wasn't finger pointing. I'm here to help people heal. I'm here to help people move through the stories that still remain silenced within their family. My dad never read my books. My younger brother never read my books. And there's a phrase, detachment with love.
Yes.
It is one of, I can't be attached to their reaction or lack thereof. If they support my work or not, I can still send them love. I can hope the best for them, that they step deeper into their own journey, and yet that is their responsibility and that is their journey. And I'm here, like I said, to help people move through their own. It took me a while to work through that. And I went deep into my own, I felt a lot of judgment and I took it on at first. I was like, but this is their judgment. This is, sometimes we'll
Right.
feel judgment from people because they know they're not stepping into their own work and they
You,
project it onto us.
you said something in your when you wrote that you felt isolating, that you're isolated from your family, like you're the black sheep. And have they ever like, Stephanie, I forgive you?
No, and I'm not looking for forgiveness because I have an interesting perspective on forgiveness. It's if we're waiting for someone to forgive us, we've actually put them on a pedestal above us. Forgiveness is for me. Forgiveness is, it's interesting. I once had come to me who had harmed me greatly, looking for absolution. And I said, it's not for me to absolve you. I don't harbor any ill
Mhm.
will towards you anymore. But absolution is between you and spirit. And so what I needed to do was forgive myself for how I had continued to harm myself because of the shame I took on because of what had
Yes,
happened to me.
yes.
So I look to forgiveness from any of my family members. It's we can relationship or not. And sometimes it can be challenging and it becomes isolating because people want to continue to see us as we were, as the hurt, angry person, which I was for a long time, versus because that helps them to really stay in their own story.
Do you the rest of your family that their story is continuing? Like you've moved past that, but their story is manifesting in other members of your family who have not embraced this position you have?
I do see it, and I see how they continue to perpetuate the own cycles that they have created for themselves. And it's not for me to point it out because if they haven't asked, it's none of my business. So, like I said,
Interesting. I'd be like all up in their Kool-Aid. And
it's
it's not your business.
right.
I guess I take a different, well, family dynamics plays into it too, because
It does.
one of the DNA in my family is we speak our minds like nobody's business, whether you like it or not. We're just very outright frank with each other. There are secrets that I know of in my family. If you do something, it will be televised.
Which
So,
seems like opposite end of the spectrum of what I've experienced because everything was a secret. And it's like you went to the grave with your
your
secrets
secret.
and they were always in the closet and no one spoke of them.
Yeah, I don't know which one is because yeah, we laugh and my mother's like CNN, right? If you tell her something, you just have to tell my mom, and then I'll get 50 calls from the cousins, the aunts, the everyone.
That's
Oh,
hilarious. That's hilarious. I guess it depends on what it is. It's
it
whereas
doesn't matter what it is. It doesn't matter what it is. It's going to be
well,
told.
whether you want it broadcast or not. So this is
Yeah.
where we get to use discernment of, do I want to share this or not? And listen, if I had wanted to write War and Peace, I could have. There were a lot of things that were not shared that will never be shared because they don't need to be public knowledge. I'm sharing from the perspective of, these are some of the dynamics that happen within our families, especially when there is generational functional alcoholism and abuse that, and I thought I was just going to work with families of alcoholics.
Mm.
And then as I deepened my work, it's the alcohol is that it's a what's going on underneath. I want
Right,
to,
because it could be something else, drugs or whatever your demon
right,
is.
right. And so I wanted to get to the underneath, and that's what I do now. And it's so our shame, it's our anger, it's all the emotions that we numb through our addictions of drugs and alcohol and shopping and sex and work and gardening and working out, social media. I mean, we have been taught to numb what it is that we don't want to feel. Food is
Mhm.
another one.
Yeah.
And so when we can see that, oh, I am eating because I'm comforting myself because I feel uncomfortable, that awareness is huge because then we can go a little bit deeper into, am I creating a first within my family to break out of this cycle?
Right.
What's underneath the eating for comfort? What's underneath the sugar craving? What's underneath whatever that, fill in the blank may be? That's when we get to go deeper into, what's really here. That awareness can be incredibly powerful.
That's amazing in itself to even have knowledge and have done work. I can't say I've done any, well, I did Landmark, which was a therapeutic deep dive. I can say was very effective and inspirational. But day to day, I think because my family just talks everything out.
Which is wonderful because when you know that you can give a voice to something in a safe environment where you don't feel like you're going to be judged,
Yeah.
that's huge. That is a gift in and of itself. When we can give a voice and have an honest conversation without judgment of like, and it's almost like this, you can hit yourself on the forehead and say, I was so stupid when I did this, and
Yeah.
laugh at it and learn from it. That is a unique gift that you have received.
It is, but somehow some people don't think that that's a gift. They're like, you tell everything. We need for you not to tell that. Or I'm like, well, this is what's going on with me. I mean, I tell most of the things that happens with myself. And what we started doing as family, we always get together at Thanksgiving and Christmas. This is the first Christmas that my whole family has not gotten together because we planned on going to Ghana for Christmas. And then my husband got sick. So they went without me, Stephanie. So this was a weird Christmas. But I realized the stories that we tell at Christmas time and just kind of a check-in with each other of what's going on in our lives. It's we don't need the CNN thing because most of them are in the room, right? And they can perspective. Like my mom, I say, "Oh, that happened to me when I was, so," and so it's very therapeutic in itself to have that family get together where we all sit and talk about what we want to do, why are you not married yet, or in my case, I had never planned on getting married. I like, don't tell me about this. I don't plan on getting married. Well, I'm married, but we talk about things that are really deep inside and how we feel about certain issues. So yeah, when I run into people who their families don't speak to each other, I don't understand that. I just like, how could they not talk to each other? It's like her mom or her, you know, it's just not part of the paradigm that I grew up with. So it takes me a
Mm.
little longer to understand those dynamics.
Yeah, and the word that through for me is judgment. And there was so much judgment
Mm,
in my family and a lot of shame that was carried from generation to generation. And I have a phrase that I say, if you will never be able to move someone beyond their own internalized shame. And so if they're experiencing shame because of what they did or didn't do, what did or didn't happen to them, if you're bringing up something that is in them, it shuts them right down. It's our
right.
fight, fear, freeze. It is our reptilian brain of I am not safe. I can't go there. I can't talk about this.
It makes an interesting dynamic between your spouse because if you have a spouse that don't speak about certain things or don't share with their family, and you, as soon as it happens, the rest of your side is makes for an interesting dynamic, I do have to say.
It truly does. I feel like we typically have relationships that mirror our formative years. So I
Yes.
married two alcoholics, and
Oh,
one was like my mother and one was like my father.
father.
And yet I say my second husband was one of my greatest gifts because our marriage ended a year before my career on Wall Street ended. And so all of a sudden I was thrown into this space of what am I going to focus on? Because I can't focus on his alcoholism to take me
Right,
away from what I don't want to pay attention to.
right.
And I can't get into work to take me away from this other thing that I don't have to focus on anymore anyway.
And what did you do?
Well, this was when I went to that retreat,
Uh,
and then I went into I started working with, and that really opened things up. I had done therapy, I had done 12-step. Al-Anon is for families of alcoholics. And I had already been in this process of self-discovery. And yet it was really when I started to work with a coach that things started to open up for me because it was more forward facing than backward facing. The work that I do with people combines both because I think we need to look back in some respects to see what it is that we don't want, to clear that energy and transform the story to create what it is that we do want. And so
how do you know, Stephanie, when the energy is cleared, so to speak?
you feel it. You feel blocked in a certain area. It's ideas come to you more quickly. You have more clarity. It's a true freedom getting out of the monkey mind of how am I going to fix this thing
Mhm.
into one of trust, of knowing that the answers are going to come when we're meant to receive them.
And I know you impact the world with your books. How else do you share this with the next generation to come?
I am a speaker. I run workshops. I have two courses that are offered periodically, and I also do one-on-one work with people because sometimes people want to work individually and not necessarily in a group. Other people work really well in a group. And so there's multiple ways that I work with people. Yeah, it's fun for me to be able to play in these different spaces because we all learn differently. Some people want to sit with a book. Some people want to watch a talk that I've done on stage. Other people want to hear interviews like this. And other people for the people who want to dive in, that's where the one-on in. And I typically work with people in a 3-month container because we're going to
Okay.
focus on one thing and we're
Mm.
going to go deep. And then it's go fly out of the nest.
This 3 months, is 3 months a long enough time?
Depends on what a person is working on and what they want to achieve. And people can always continue, or what they may do is then go into one of the group programs that I have.
Right.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah, it really what it is that they're diving into. And this is not therapy. And there are times where I have told people, you need to go work with a therapist first. Typically, I work with people who've done a bunch of work on a certain area
mhm. Okay.
and they feel stuck. Why can't I move forward? that's when we jump in, because that they've already done a lot of the mental and the emotional work. Now we're going to go deeper into the story, and we're going to connect with
Okay.
the energy, and we're going to clear that.
That makes sense. That's why I was asking, is 3 months enough? Because if you're working with someone who's really raw and not used to speaking and not used to, then that in itself can take a long time just to get a
Ex
breakthrough.
exactly. And that's why I did 12-step and I did therapy for years. And I worked with different therapists who helped me through different challenges. And it was very interesting in that there was in New Jersey, one day a year, they have something called GelCon. And it is a
What
joint
is it?
between
Tell
GelCon, it's what they
Spell it.
call it,
Spell it.
GAON.
Oh,
It's a day of just between AA and Al-Anon. And there was, I went to an AA meeting because I'd never been to one. And there was a gentleman who told a story about how when he was a teenager, his father had forced him to do heroin with him, which is a horrible,
it
horrible story.
is. That is.
But I led an ACOA, Adult Children of Alcoholics meeting, and the man came in and told the exact same story. And it was then that I realized how stuck people become in their stories. Like, even though they've done work
Right.
in 12-step or with therapy, it's like they continue to repeat it. So it's when we decide we want to get off of that hamster wheel and shift into the next level of ourselves, that's my special sauce.
Got it. Got it. No, that's perfect. I hear people with the same story all the time. If you bring up a topic, they're like, well, I did this, and it becomes them, right? It's a part of them, a part of who you are. You actually know that person sometimes by by that story, and you want them to bring it up every time you meet. It's just become a part of their conversation and their referral point for them that's not necessarily good for them, but the impression that it gives you resonates. And what you just said, clearly, you need to do some work before then.
Yeah, and I don't even think that they necessarily realize it, like how stuck in their story they are, because like you said, it defines them.
Yes.
And the question to answer is, do we want to be defined by the box that we've been in, or do we want to step out of it and create something without those four walls or six walls if it's got the floor and the ceiling? It's like we get to create something new for ourselves, and we get to choose every single day through the many, many decisions that we make of how do I want to move forward? How do I want to really create something new for myself? Because I'm tired of saying I'm, the fourth generation of women in my family who are sexually abused and not protected. Okay, yes, that happened. And yes, I come from a family that has multiple generations of functional alcoholism. And yet I can take the wisdom from what I learned from those. I now help people heal from their stories.
It's almost a gift and like a backwards gift, I'll call it.
It truly is. And so I think we can our stories to propel us forward and not keep us in that box that even sometimes our family put us in.
But you have to own the story.
Yes, we do.
You have to get to the point where you own that story. And as we're talking right now, I realize I have to stop. There's some people I know who, as you see them, you know the story they're going to tell. So once in a while, I start telling it for them. I need to stop that because that story defines them. But you just hear it so much, you already know what they're going to say. And I need to just stop and give them the and to say that.
And a question, if it feels safe to ask, is to them is, how do you want to transform it? And see what they say. See what that sparks in them. Because yes, they may be thinking about a shift this, but I don't know how.
Right.
Asking that what if question
It's a
might
good
spark
point.
in them.
Yeah.
And it takes you out of the space of judgment of I already know who this person is. I don't see them differently versus how might they want to shift? Like, and it sparks curiosity in both of you. And that's where we get to kind of play in, what would it look like if in 3 months,
Nodding,
6
I'm
months?
nodding my head to the people who are not watching, nodding, sitting here, nodding my head.
Right? It's like it's where we get to play with the universe, with consciousness of, we don't have to be as stuck as I think sometimes too, family doesn't want us to change because, like I said before, then they don't have to
Have
see
to,
what they're not doing.
correct.
Whereas when we play in the energy of possibility, even a minor shift can open up a door to wondrous things for us.
That's so profound because looking at myself and to do new things. I think that was honed in me because of the freedom I feel in my family to go do my own thing, to go do whatever, I want. Sometimes they don't agree with it. They're like, "Why are you doing that?" But I have to say, most times they're like, "Oh, you're doing that? I'm coming with you." It's okay to be the first, bring it up if you feel you're going to get acknowledgement. But some people don't bring it up because they feel, now if I say that, I'm going to be shot down and I'll never do that. So yeah, it's a blessing that I have that talkative family.
It is a blessing. And the wonderful thing is when we see something we like in someone else, we can take on that energy. Like when we see a family that is close knit and loving, we're seeing that for a reason. And it's not to remind us of what we may not have received. Like we can take on that feeling of love and compassion, support and play.
Definitely. So
And
what's next for you, Stephanie? What's next?
next for me is so the second edition of The Impact of Silence will be published at the end of February 2025. So a
Right.
little more than a month from now. I am speaking at a women's executive conference in New York City at the end of, actually at the beginning of March for International Women's Day.
Ah, that's amazing.
Yes, and after being the caregiver for my dad for 9 months, I'm reestablishing my business and speaking and working with people, and I'm really loving stepping back into this, having taken a little bit of a break because I needed to. I was
Yes.
for him, and there were so many gifts that I received, things that I had been searching for. So living with my dad, I had not lived with him since I was 5.
Mm, wow.
And I didn't realize the level of some of the things that I was seeking and wanted to heal till I got here. There were so many gifts. And so I take those gifts forward. And so there's a whole new level of what I'm bringing to the stage to my clients. And so it's getting back out in the world with this new, renewed energy and joy and freedom.
No, thank you. And where can people find you if they're looking for you?
My website, which is wayofthediamondwarrior.com.
And why Diamond Warrior? That's my last question I'm asking you. Why
We,
Diamond Warrior?
so many of us have been warriors within our own life, and we fight these invisible battles. We fight even the visible battles, but it's mostly the invisible ones. And we all have a diamond that is waiting to shine in all of its facets and all of its aspects. And so we can be a diamond and a warrior and allow our diamond to shine at the same time.
I like that. Some people are diamond in the rough. Some
Yes.
people are shining, glittery, already polished up. I can feel that. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing all this information with us. And I think I'm gonna grab your book, your first book to get a read and learn a little bit more. That's my new thing now. I'm reading more than business business books and
Mhm.
business magazines. So this would be a good one. Is it on Amazon or
It is. It is on Amazon. So if I search of McAuliffe, my last name, with the message in the bottle, it will come up.
got it?
Yeah, comes up
Will do.
easier. It's easier to find. And thank you. This has been an awesome conversation and a true gift to be able to be here with you today.
I appreciate you, and I hope we can have another one, go dig a little deeper on a different topic. So thank you.
I would love that. And thank you.
This is Dr. Sandi. Thank you so much for sharing your journey on the first, where no two stories are alike, even if the circumstances are similar. Let this discussion serve as inspiration for others to show what's possible, and more importantly, to produce seconds and thirds.